Genesis chapter 40 is where we are today. Genesis 40. We've been looking at Joseph's faithfulness in many different avenues, and today we're looking at Joseph faithful when discouraged. These 23 verses are telling us of some discouraging times for Joseph. You know, he had been on the mountaintop, but he was going down into the valley. Started reading with verse 1. And it came about, after these things, the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt offended the Lord, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was furious with these two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. So he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard, in the jail, the same place where Joseph was imprisoned. The captain of the bodyguard put Joseph in charge of them, and he took care of them, and they were in confinement for some time. Then the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt, who were confined in the jail, both had a dream the same night. Each man with his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning and observed them, behold, they were dejected. As he asked Pharaoh's officials who were with him in confinement in his master's house, "Why are your faces so sad today?" Then they said to him, "We have had a dream, and there is no one to interpret it." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell it to me, please." So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, "In my dream, behold, there was a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. And as it was budding, its blossoms came out, and its clusters produced ripe grapes. Now Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, so I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I put the cup in Pharaoh's hand." Then Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you will put Pharaoh's cup into his hand according to your former custom when you were his cupbearer. Only keep me in mind when it goes well with you, and please do me a kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh and get me out of this house," out of the jail. "For I was in fact kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing that they should have put me into this dungeon." When the chief baker saw that he had interpreted favorably, he said to Joseph, "I also saw in my dream, and behold, there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. And in the top basket there was some of all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, and the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." Then Joseph answered and said, "This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and will hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh off of you." Thus it came about on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his office, and he put the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot about him. There's a poem that I've always liked. It's called "Don't Quit." When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you've trudged seems all uphill, when funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile, but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. Life is queer with its twists and turns, as every one of us sometimes learns. And many a failure turns about when we might have won if we just stuck it out. Don't give up, though the pace seems slow. you may succeed with another blow. Often the goal is nearer than it seems to a faint and faltering man. Often the struggler has given up when he might have captured the victor's cup. And he learned too late, when the night slipped down, how close he was to the golden crown. Success is failure turned inside out, the silver tint of the clouds of doubt. And you never can tell how close you are. It may be near when it seems so far. So stick to the fight when you're hardest hit. It's when things seem worst that you mustn't quit. Have you ever felt discouraged? Have you ever felt like giving up? Maybe you're feeling discouraged right now, this morning. One thing is for sure. You probably will be discouraged sometime in the future. So remember, do not quit. The truth is that life sometimes is unfair, and sometimes it can be very hard. In our last sermon, we left Joseph in prison. Potiphar had put him there because of some false accusations that his wife had made. See, Joseph knew what it was to be on the mountain, and he also knew what it was to be down in the valley of life. Let's talk about those. Mountains and valleys. At the age of 17, Joseph was on the mountain because he was the favorite son of his father. And to prove it, he had a multicolored coat. Now you tell me what you think. Mountain or valley? Mountain, okay. A short time later, his brothers had sold him into slavery to a passing caravan, and he ended up a slave in the Egyptian Potiphar's house. Mountain or valley? Valley. Joseph made the best of the situation, and it wasn't long until he was put in charge of all of Potiphar's house. Mountain or valley? Mountain. Joseph had things going pretty good until Potiphar's wife falsely accused him, and he was thrown into prison. Mountain or valley? Right. Joseph was in jail, but he interpreted the king's cupbearer and baker's dreams. It was promised by the cupbearer that he would be remembered. That he would remember Joseph. Mountain or valley? It can be either one, right? Depending on whether you're focusing on the promise or being in prison. Well, the cupbearer forgot for 2 whole years about his promise to remember Joseph. Mountain or valley? Valley. Joseph experienced many mountains, and he also experienced many valleys. But you know something? One thing that we can say about Joseph, no matter whether he was on the mountaintop or down in the valley, he was faithful. He was faithful. Let's contrast Joseph's faithfulness here a bit. Through all these mountains and valleys that Joseph passed through, he certainly had every opportunity to be discouraged. He had every opportunity to throw in the towel and to give up, but he didn't do it. Through all the good and the bad times that came Joseph's way, we find one thing that was constant. He was faithful. Joseph was faithful even when he was discouraged. A lot of you know Johnny Erickson Tata. I want to tell you a story that happened to her before she was Tata. She was still just Joni Erickson. She tells this story of the time when her father's barn caught on fire. This is her words. Our first thought was for the safety of the horses. Since fire can cause an otherwise calm horse to go wild with fear, we covered their eyes with the blankets that usually were under their saddles. This allowed us to lead them past the flames to safety. The smell of smoke, the sound of all the commotion surrounding a horse at such a time would surely be enough to send a horse into full panic mode. You know, Loveway actually had to close down one night because when the dump was on fire, even though it was far away from Loveway, the smoke was going up there, and the horses were smelling that, and they were just too jittery, and they didn't feel like it'd be safe for the kids. They actually had to close Loveway down that night. You know, there are humans. The horses' humans were covering their eyes with blankets and were asking the horses to follow them when they could not see where they were going. To the horse, in the words of C.S. Lewis, the whole proceeding would seem as if it were a theologian to cast grave doubts on the goodness of man. But unfortunately, our horses were not theologians. They were horses. In that confusing moment, when they could not understand what was happening, they trusted us to care for them, as we had always been doing. There was no rebelling, no challenging of our authority, of our wisdom. And as a result, we were able to save their lives. We couldn't save the barn, but we saved our horses. You and me can learn a lesson from this, from these horses. The horses put tremendous confidence in their masters. Joseph put tremendous faith in his God, in the mountains and in the valleys. And as a result, God guided him safely through them all. But how about you and me? Where are we putting our trust? Are we faithful to God in the bad times or just the good times? Joseph's faithfulness was constant. He was constantly faithful to God, whether he was on the mountaintop or whether he was in the valley below. There are 5 lessons I think we can learn from this. First of all, Joseph didn't become bitter. He became better. And that's what we have to learn. See, we can get mad. We can get mad at God. We can get mad at the people who have offended us. We can get mad at the other person. Or we can simply let that valley experience make us get better. That's what Joseph did. Second lesson, Joseph didn't turn his back on God. Instead, he turned his face to God and sought God. That's what valleys can do to you sometimes. They can make you turn to God for help when all of others fail. Don't turn your back on God when things are going bad. Instead, turn your face up to Him and seek Him. Third lesson, Joseph didn't become impatient. You see, when the cupbearer forgot for 2 whole years what he promised Joseph he was going to do, Joseph could have got really upset and discouraged, but he didn't. Instead, he learned to wait on God. Sometimes God's timetable is not the same as our timetable. You know, we want God to be in a hurry, but God's not always in a hurry. Time doesn't mean that much to God because He's got it all. But you and I, we have a limited amount of time, and so we want God to do it now. Joseph didn't become impatient. Instead, he learned to wait on God. Fourth lesson, Joseph didn't become a character. Instead, he learned character and confidence. There's quite a difference between becoming a character and learning character. Fifth lesson, Joseph didn't get lost in loneliness. Certainly could have. His family abandoned him. His brothers sold him, in fact. Wherever he was, He made new friends. And he rose to the occasion, no matter what the occasion. That's what we need to do too. You see, God never leaves us. God is with us on the mountaintop. He's with us in the valley. So there's no need to be lonely, because He's always there with us. Well, what about you? Remember that when things get looking bad, God must be doing something good for the devil to be working so hard. Joseph shows us that God is always with us, no matter what we're going through. God will never abandon us. We can count on Him being with us in all that we go through, the good times and the bad. When you look at Joseph's life, we see that Joseph probably grew the most during those bad times, because he looked to God for help. And when someone's looking to God for help, God is going to give it. Because He's our Heavenly Father. He's our loving Father. He's the one who wants the best for us. And so when we're seeking His face, He's not going to say, "Man, I'm going to go do something else. You're on your own." No, He's not like that. He's going to help us. The good work that God started in us, He's going to see it completed. That's His promise. You see, we have the benefit of being able to look back on Joseph's life. And we can see that the difficult times in Joseph's life were only the steps of preparation for what was to come. God was preparing him to carry out the plan God had already set in motion years before. Sometimes when we have discouraging times, we forget to look up and we forget to look ahead to the better day that's going to bring. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. We must remember that even if that light does not come to us here on earth, it's still coming. Because God said so. God has a place prepared for us. God knows what He's doing. God doesn't make mistakes.
That's right. Amen.
And when we get to the end of the tunnel, when we start seeing the light again, God does something special. He rights all wrongs. He forgives all failures. He gives us unspeakable joy.
Oh, yes.
And sometimes when we're in the valley, we forget that. All we see is the darkness instead of the light at the end of the tunnel. God rewards those who are faithful. That's the message of Joseph. Even when Joseph was discouraged, he continued to be faithful. May that be said of all of us, that we were found faithful. Even through the discouragements, even through the distresses, even through the problems that we had to face, even through the valleys that seemed unending. May it be said of us, we were faithful to God, and we let Him lead us. We're going to sing an invitation hymn this morning. It's an opportunity for you. You're discouraged. Find the hope, find the light at the end of that tunnel. Let's stand and let's sing. And if you need to make a decision today, we invite you to do so.